In the heart of the African savanna, nestled between vast stretches of acacia trees and sun-baked earth, lay the small tribal African village of Nyanza. Life in Nyanza was simple, but for Amina, it was a constant struggle. From the moment she was born, it seemed that fate had dealt her a cruel hand. Her parents, who had been dirt poor, passed away from an assortment of illnesses and diseases that plagued the region for many decades, leaving her to fend for herself in a world that had little compassion for the weak. The village elders would often speak of the spirits and ancestors that watched over them, but Amina felt as though she had been forgotten by them all, which made her even more bitter and feeling sorry for herself. Her days were filled with endless toil, doing one difficult task after another, and often placing herself at the mercy of other people and hoping that she could scrape up enough work to make it through yet another day. There seemed to be no end to all of the unwanted and exploitive offers from many of the men in the village to do the most ungodly things for money, including prostitution, but she wouldn't allow herself to fall into that trap no matter how much she actually needed to. With the first light of dawn, and until she couldn't possibly find the strength to carry on, and into the middle of the night, she continued to work herself to the point of absolute exhaustion, even when she worked until she passed out, but still just barely made it each day. She would rise to tend to the small patch of land she owned with soil that was dry, unyielding, and unforgiving, and no matter how hard she worked, it never seemed to yield enough to sustain her. Her hands were calloused, her back bent from the relentless labor, but still, she persevered. Each day, she would gather what little she could from the land and make her way to the market, hoping to sell her meager harvest for a few coins. The villagers would often whisper as she passed, their eyes filled with pity or disdain. They saw her tattered clothes, her gaunt frame, and the weariness etched into her face. Some would offer her a coin out of charity, while others would turn away, unwilling to face the harsh reality of her life. Amina hated their pity, hated the way they looked at her as though she were something less than human. She longed for a different life, one where she could hold her head high and walk among them as an equal. As the years passed, Amina's bitterness grew. She watched as others in the village prospered, their crops flourishing, their children laughing and playing in the fields. She saw the way the women wore bright, beautiful fabrics and adorned themselves with jewelry that sparkled in the sunlight. She saw the way the men gathered around the fire at night, their bellies full, their spirits high, sharing stories and laughter. And she resented them all, not because of what they had, but because she didn't have any of those things or that sort of life. One night, as she lay on the hard earth that served as her bed inside her small shabby hut, Amina's thoughts turned dark. She had heard stories of those who had made deals and contracts with the spirits, trading their souls for wealth and power. Desperation gnawed at her heart, and she found herself wondering if she could do the same. "What do I have to lose?" she whispered to herself. "I have nothing, nobody, and I am nothing. Perhaps it is time to seek out the spirits and ask for what I want." The thought consumed her, and she could think of little else in the days that followed. She knew the village elders would condemn such thoughts, but Amina no longer cared. She was tired of the endless struggle, tired of the life that had been forced upon her, due to no fault of her own. She began to seek out the wise women of the village, those who were said to have knowledge of the old ways. She asked them about the spirits, about the rituals that could summon them. But they would only shake their heads and warn her against such, as there are many unknown and unwelcome consequences that always accompanied such requests, knowing that it could bring eternal damnation upon not only herself, but to the entire village if gone unchecked and get out of control. "Do not seek the spirits, Amina," one old woman said, her voice trembling with fear. "They are not to be trifled with. The price they demand is always too high." But Amina was undeterred. She began to venture deep into the forest, far from the village, searching for signs of the spirits. The forest was a place of shadows and secrets, where the light of the sun barely penetrated the thick canopy of trees. It was said that the spirits dwelled there, in the darkness, far from the eyes of men. For days she wandered, calling out to the spirits, begging them to hear her plea. But there was only silence. Then, one night, as she sat by a small fire, her voice hoarse from her calls, she felt a presence. The air around her grew cold, and the fire flickered as though caught in a sudden breeze. A shiver ran down her spine, and she knew she was no longer alone. Although she could not actually see anything, there was a sense of dread, darkness, and an evil presence of 10,000 years screaming from the depths of inhumanity. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and imposing, cloaked in darkness. His eyes glowed with an eerie light, and his voice was like the rustling of dead leaves. "You have called, and I have come," the figure said. "I am your ancestor, the spirit who watches over your bloodline. Why do you disturb my rest, child?" Amina's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to speak. "I seek wealth and power," she said, her voice trembling. "I am tired of living in poverty, tired of being mocked and scorned. I want to be rich, to live a life of luxury. I am willing to pay any price." The spirit's laughter echoed through the forest, a sound that sent a chill through Amina's bones. "Any price, you say," the spirit repeated, his tone mocking. "You know not what you ask, child. Wealth and power are not gifts to be given lightly. There is always a cost." "I don't care," Amina cried, her desperation boiling over. "I will pay whatever it takes. Just give me the life I desire, I will concern myself with the cost at a later time." The spirit was silent for a moment, as though considering her request. Then he spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. "Very well. I shall grant you what you desire. You will have wealth beyond your wildest dreams. But know this, there is a curse that comes with it. Each day, you will age faster than normal, your body will weaken with sickness, and those you once envied will come to despise you. You will find yourself alone, hated, and unloved. Do you still wish to proceed?" Amina hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind, but more than anything she was driven by her desire and didn't feel that the price she would have to pay could possibly be any worse than what her life was like now. In the end, her longing for a better life was too strong, and she pushed the doubt aside. "I accept," she said firmly. "Give me the wealth, and I will bear the curse." The spirit's eyes gleamed with a sinister light. "So be it," he said. "When you awake tomorrow, you will find your wish fulfilled. But remember, child, the price you pay is not one you can easily escape." With that, the spirit vanished into the shadows, leaving Amina alone by the fire. The night seemed darker than before, and the silence was oppressive. But Amina's heart was filled with a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. She had done it. She had made a pact with the spirits, and soon, her life would change forever, unfortunately, in many more disastrous and sinister ways than she knew or anticipated. The next morning, Amina awoke to the sound of birds singing outside her hut. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream. But as she opened her eyes, she gasped in shock. Her small, dilapidated hut had been transformed into a grand mansion, with walls of polished stone and floors covered in rich, colorful rugs. The simple bed she had slept on was now a luxurious four-poster bed, draped in silk and velvet. She rose from the bed and looked around in awe. Everywhere she turned, there was wealth, golden ornaments, glittering jewels, and fine clothes. She rushed to the mirror that now hung on the wall and stared at her reflection. She was no longer the ragged, worn-out woman she had been the night before. Her hair was thick and lustrous, her skin smooth and radiant. She looked like a queen. Amina's heart swelled with joy. She had done it. She had escaped the life of poverty and misery that had plagued her for so long. She could hardly wait to show the villagers what she had become. They would no longer look down on her, they would envy her, worship her. But as she stepped outside her mansion, she noticed something strange. The villagers, who usually bustled about with energy and cheer, seemed subdued. They glanced at her with wide eyes, but instead of admiration, she saw fear. Some even crossed themselves and muttered prayers as she passed. Amina's excitement began to wane as she realized that the villagers were avoiding her. No one came to congratulate her on her newfound wealth, and the children who usually played in the streets now stayed far away from her. Confused, she approached one of the village women she had known for years. "Isn't it wonderful?" Amina said, gesturing to her mansion. "I have finally found my fortune." The woman looked at her with a mix of pity and fear. "Amina, what have you done?" she whispered. "We all heard the rumors. They say you made a pact with an evil spirit. You have wealth, yes, but at what cost?" Amina's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she demanded. "I have everything I ever wanted." The woman shook her head sadly. "You may have riches, Amina, but you are cursed. We can see it in your eyes, in the way you move. The spirits are angry, and they have placed a heavy burden upon you. We fear for you, and for ourselves." Amina felt a cold dread settle over her. She had been so blinded by her desire for wealth that she had not truly understood the curse she had brought upon herself. She hurried back to her mansion, her mind racing. She had to find a way to undo the pact, to rid herself of the curse. But how? As the days passed, the curse began to take hold. Each morning, Amina would wake to find new lines etched into her face, her body growing weaker and frailer. The once lustrous hair that had filled her with pride now thinned and turned grey. She began to suffer from strange, unexplainable illnesses that no doctor could cure. Her hands shook, and her vision blurred. But the worst part of the curse was the isolation. The villagers, who had once pitied her, now avoided her like a plague. They whispered about her in hushed tones, casting fearful glances at her mansion. They believed her wealth was tainted, that she had brought a dark force into their midst. And in their fear, they shunned her completely. Even the men of the village that once propositioned her for sexual favors, now feared and totally stood clear of her. Amina's loneliness grew unbearable. She had everything she had ever dreamed of, yet she had never felt more alone. The luxurious mansion that had once filled her with joy now felt like a prison. The silence of the empty halls echoed in her ears, reminding her of the warmth and laughter she had sacrificed. She had become a prisoner of her own greed, trapped in a gilded luxurious cage of her own making. One night, unable to bear the solitude any longer, Amina decided to venture into the village. She hoped to find someone, anyone, who would speak to her, who would offer her some comfort. But as she walked through the dark streets, she saw the villagers shutting their doors and windows, their faces pale with fear as they watched her pass. Desperate, she approached an old friend, a woman named Zoe, who had once been like a sister to her. Zoe was known for her kind heart, and Amina hoped that she would still show her some kindness despite the curse. But when Amina knocked on her door, Zoe's face appeared in the window, twisted with fear and sorrow. "Amina," Zoe said, her voice trembling, "you must leave. The spirits have marked you. I cannot help you. No one can." Tears welled in Amina's eyes, but before she could respond, Zoe slammed the door shut, the sound echoing in the still night. Amina stood there, feeling the weight of her choices pressing down on her. The reality of her situation hit her with full force. She had everything she had ever wanted, yet she had nothing that truly mattered. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, and Amina's health continued to deteriorate. She grew weaker with each passing day, her body ravaged by the curse. The vibrant energy she had once felt was replaced by a constant fatigue, and she could barely summon the strength to rise from her bed. The luxurious meals that had once filled her with delight now tasted like ashes in her mouth. In her despair, Amina began to seek out answers. She remembered the stories the elders had told her as a child, stories of ancient rituals, of powerful spirits, and of the ways to appease them. She realized that if she was to free herself from the curse, she would need to find the spirit who had cursed her and plead for mercy. But to do so, she would need to embark on a dangerous journey, one that would take her far from the safety of her mansion and deep into the heart of the unknown. With what little strength she had left, Amina gathered supplies and set out on her quest. She knew the journey would be perilous, but she had no other choice. The alternative was to wither away in her mansion, cursed and alone. She would rather face the dangers of the unknown than live another day in her current state. The first leg of her journey took her through the dense forest that surrounded the village. The trees towered above her, their branches twisting like the gnarled fingers of ancient spirits. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, and the silence was broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant cry of a wild animal. Amina's heart pounded in her chest, but she pressed on, driven by the hope that she could find a way to break the curse. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the path became more treacherous. The undergrowth grew thick, and the ground was uneven, forcing her to navigate carefully. At times, she had to climb over fallen logs or wade through shallow streams. Her body, weakened by the curse, struggled to keep up, but she refused to give up. One night, as she set up camp by a small clearing, Amina was startled by a strange sound. It was a low, mournful wail, like the cry of a lost soul. She froze, her heart racing, as the sound grew louder. Then, out of the shadows, a figure appeared, a spirit, its form shifting and ethereal, like smoke caught in the wind. Amina's breath caught in her throat. She knew that spirits roamed the forest because of her past experience. The spirit's eyes, glowing with an otherworldly light, bore into her, and she felt a wave of cold wash over her. "Why do you wander these woods, mortal?" the spirit asked, its voice a whisper carried on the wind. Amina swallowed her fear and spoke. "I seek the spirit who cursed me. I wish to undo the pact I made and rid myself of this curse." The spirit regarded her for a moment, its expression unreadable. "The path you seek is fraught with danger," it said. "Many have ventured into these woods in search of answers, but few have returned. The spirit you seek is powerful and cunning. He does not take kindly to those who wish to break their deals." "I have no other choice," Amina replied, her voice trembling. "I cannot live like this any longer. Please, if you know where I can find him, tell me." The spirit was silent for a moment before it spoke again. "Very well," it said. "I will guide you, but know this, once you begin this journey, there is no turning back. You must face whatever lies ahead with courage and resolve." Amina nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. "I understand," she said. "I am ready." The spirit beckoned for her to follow, and Amina did so, her heart heavy with fear and hope. The spirit led her deeper into the forest, the trees growing denser and the air colder with each step. The path was treacherous, winding through narrow ravines and over steep cliffs. At times, Amina had to climb over rocks and roots, her hands and knees scraped and bruised. But she pressed on, driven by the hope that she could find a way to break the curse. The spirit offered no words of encouragement, only guiding her silently through the darkness. The journey seemed endless, and Amina began to wonder if she would ever reach her destination. Finally, after what felt like days of travel, the spirit stopped before a massive stone door carved into the side of a mountain. The door was covered in ancient symbols, and a sense of foreboding hung in the air. Amina could feel the power emanating from the door, and she knew that this was the place she sought. "This is the entrance to the spirit's domain," the guide said, its voice low and grave. "Beyond this door lies the one who cursed you. Be warned, he is not easily swayed, and his wrath is great. You must be prepared to face whatever challenges he may set before you." Amina took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "I am ready," she said, though her voice betrayed her fear. The spirit nodded and slowly vanished into the shadows, leaving Amina alone before the door. With trembling hands, she pushed against the stone, and the door creaked open, revealing a dark tunnel that seemed to stretch into eternity. Amina stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a heavy thud. She was plunged into darkness, and for a moment, panic seized her. But then she saw a faint light flickering in the distance, and she made her way toward it. The tunnel was long and winding, the walls cold and damp. Amina's footsteps echoed eerily in the silence, and she could hear the distant drip of water. The air grew colder with each step, and a sense of dread settled over her. Finally, she emerged into a vast chamber, the walls lined with torches that cast flickering shadows across the stone floor. At the center of the chamber stood a throne, and upon it sat the spirit who had cursed her. He was a towering figure, his form shifting between that of a man and a beast. His eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and his voice was a deep, rumbling growl. "You have returned, mortal," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Why do you dare to enter my domain?" Amina swallowed her fear and stepped forward. "I have come to plead for mercy," she said, her voice shaking. "I made a mistake in accepting your offer. The wealth you gave me has brought me nothing but misery. I beg you, undo the curse and free me from this torment." The spirit's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound that sent chills down Amina's spine. "Mercy," he sneered. "You ask for mercy after so willingly accepting my gift? You are a fool, mortal. You were so blinded by your greed that you did not consider the consequences of your actions. And now you seek to escape the price you must pay." Amina's heart sank as the spirit's words cut through her. She knew he was right, she had been foolish, driven by envy and desperation. But she could not give up now. She had come too far to turn back. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I have learned my lesson. I see now that true happiness cannot be bought with wealth. I have lost everything that matters to me, my health, my friends, my peace of mind. I am willing to do whatever it takes to make amends." The spirit was silent for a moment, his gaze piercing her very soul. Then he spoke, his tone cold and unforgiving. "Very well. If you truly wish to be free of the curse, you must complete 3 tasks. Only then will I consider undoing the pact." Amina's heart raced with fear and determination. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The first task is a test of courage. You must venture into the darkest part of this forest and retrieve a stone from the Well of Shadows. It is a place where the light of the sun has never touched, and the spirits that dwell there are hostile to all who enter." Amina's breath caught in her throat. She had heard tales of the Well of Shadows, a place of unspeakable horror, where even the bravest warriors had been known to lose their minds. But she had no choice. If she was to break the curse, she would have to face the challenge. The spirit's voice interrupted her thoughts. "The second task is a test of wisdom. You must seek out the ancient tree of knowledge, hidden deep within the forest. There, you will find a riddle that has confounded mortals for centuries. Solve it, and you will gain the wisdom needed to complete your journey." Amina nodded, though fear gnawed at her insides. The tasks were daunting, but she was determined to succeed. "The final task," the spirit continued, "is a test of humility. You must find the river of tears and cleanse yourself in its waters. Only then will you truly understand the value of the life you once had and the folly of your desires." With that, the spirit waved his hand, and a doorway appeared at the far end of the chamber. "Go now, mortal," he said, his voice a low growl. "Your time is short, and the curse will not wait. Complete these tasks, and you may yet earn your freedom." Amina took a deep breath and steeled herself for the challenges ahead. She had come this far, and she would not falter now. With a determined heart, she stepped through the doorway and into the unknown. The first task took her to the deepest part of the forest, where the air was thick with the scent of decay and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. The Well of Shadows was a place of darkness and despair, and Amina could feel the malevolent presence of the spirits that dwelled there. But she pressed on, her fear giving way to a fierce determination. She had faced so much already, she would not let this place break her. With trembling hands, she lowered herself into the well and retrieved the stone that lay at its bottom. The darkness seemed to close in around her, but she fought her way back to the surface, clutching the stone tightly in her hand. The second task led her to the Tree of Knowledge, a massive, ancient tree that towered above the forest. Its branches stretched out like the arms of a giant, and its leaves whispered secrets in a language she could not understand. At the base of the tree, she found the riddle inscribed on a stone tablet. It was a riddle that had confounded scholars and sages for centuries, but Amina, with her newfound determination, approached it with a clear mind. She pondered the words, drawing on the lessons she had learned from her own life, the folly of greed, the importance of humility, and the value of true happiness. Finally, the answer came to her, and she spoke it aloud. The tree shuddered, and a single leaf fell into her hand. She had passed the test of wisdom. The final task brought her to the River of Tears, a place where the waters were said to be the tears of those who had learned the hard lessons of life. The river flowed through a narrow canyon, its waters dark and cold. Amina hesitated at the water's edge, knowing that this was the most difficult task of all. But she knew what she had to do. With a deep breath, she waded into the river, the cold water seeping into her bones. As she submerged herself in the river, she felt a wave of emotions wash over her: regret, sorrow, and a deep, aching sense of loss. But there was also a sense of release, as if the river was cleansing her of the darkness that had tainted her soul. When she emerged from the river, she felt different. The curse that had weighed so heavily on her seemed to lift, and she knew she had passed the final test. With the 3 tasks completed, Amina returned to the spirit's domain. The spirit awaited her in the chamber, his gaze unreadable as she approached. "You have done well, mortal," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of respect. "You have faced your fears, proven your wisdom, and shown humility. I will honor my promise and undo the curse." Amina felt a surge of relief as the spirit waved his hand, and she felt the curse lift from her body. The lines on her face softened, her strength returned, and the weight that had pressed down on her heart was gone. But the spirit was not finished. "Remember this, Amina," he said, his tone stern. "Wealth and power are fleeting, but the lessons you have learned will stay with you for the rest of your life. Do not forget the price you paid for your desires." Amina nodded, her heart filled with gratitude and resolve. She had been given a second chance, and she would not waste it. The spirit waved his hand, and Amina found herself back in her mansion. But it no longer felt like a prison. She had been freed from the curse, and she knew that true happiness did not lie in wealth or power, but in the love and kindness of others. From that day forward, Amina dedicated herself to helping others. She used her wealth, which the spirit allowed her to keep, to improve the lives of the villagers, building schools, providing food for the hungry, and caring for the sick. The villagers, seeing the change in her, began to accept her once more, and she found the love and companionship she had longed for. Years later, as she lay on her deathbed, Amina reflected on her life. She was surrounded by friends and loved ones, her heart filled with peace. She knew that she had made mistakes, but she had also learned from them. And as she closed her eyes for the final time, she knew that she had lived a life worth living. But as the darkness closed in around her, Amina felt a strange sensation, as if she were floating. She opened her eyes and found herself in a familiar place, the chamber of the spirit who had cursed her all those years ago. The spirit stood before her, his gaze unreadable. "You have lived a good life, Amina," he said, his voice softer than before. But your journey is not yet over. Amina frowned, confusion washing over her. What do you mean? The spirit smiled, a mysterious glint in his eyes. You have been given a gift, Amina, a second chance. But there is still one more lesson you must learn. Before she could ask what he meant, the chamber faded away, and Amina found herself back in her mansion, young and healthy once more. She gasped, looking around in shock. Had it all been a dream? Or had the spirit truly given her another chance at life? Amina didn't know, but she did know one thing: she would not make the same mistakes again. She would live her life to the fullest, cherishing every moment and every person who crossed her path. And so, with a heart full of hope and determination, Amina stepped out of her mansion and into the bright sunlight, ready to face whatever the future held. The journey had been long and difficult, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. And this time, she would make sure that the life she lived was one worth remembering.